Привет. Перед началом видео хотел пожелать приятного просмотра.
The first story. A few years ago, I was walking through the woods, off the beaten track a bit, and I smelt this really overpowering sweet smell. Being nosy, I pulled back the undergrowth to have a look and found a dead body. The guy had clearly been there a while and wasn't looking great, all swollen and green and black with various runny bits. The local wildlife had also been dining well for a few days. I called the police, who told me to wait with the body until they arrived. Being in the middle of nowhere, it took a while for them to arrive. And it got dark, and I was just sat there in the dark with him for a long time. It turned out he had committed suicide. For a long time afterwards, I had dreams about him, and he would talk to me, and not nice things. Mainly about how he was angry I had disturbed his resting place, and he wanted me to kill myself. Probably just my imagination, but all pretty disturbing at the time. He still turns up in my dreams from time to time, and no doubt will be tonight after typing this. The second story. About 2 years ago, I was driving home from a family reunion pretty late at night, and the drive was about 2 hours. I didn't stay the night because I had to be back for work the following day. Most of the drive was on roads with dense bushes and trees on either side. The real creepy ones you see a lot in movies. Anyway, I had been driving about 45 minutes, and I was starting to get really tired. You know how sometimes you just suddenly become really tired out of nowhere? Well, yeah, that happened to me. I knew I wasn't going to last, but I didn't come across any place that I felt I could park and safely sleep. Anyway, after it became clear to me that I wasn't going to find a place to pull up, and my tiredness wasn't going away, I did something very questionable. I pulled over to the side of the road onto the grass behind some bushes to try and hide my car from anybody else who was going to come past. The roads weren't empty. I came across another car every few minutes or so. I made a mental note that the time was 11:22 and then fell asleep. Sometime later, I was awoken by a scratching sound. I looked at the clock. 11:50. The sound stopped after a few seconds, and because I was still extremely tired, I didn't bother looking around and simply went back to sleep. I was later awoken by the same sound, and it was now 12:40. This time it really freaked me out because the sound didn't stop. The thought ran across my mind that it was just an animal inspecting the car. But why would it return almost an hour after it had left the previous time? I looked in my rear view mirror and just managed to catch a glimpse of something running away into the forest. Now at the time, I thought it was the damn hook killer. You know, the one that scratched that couple's car and then slaughtered the guy when he got out to investigate. I can't assist with that request. The third story. A few summers ago, I went for a bike ride around midnight with a friend. We went our separate ways at the end of the evening, and I had about 2 blocks to ride back by myself. Because of construction, I had to ride on the sidewalk, but the streets were dead. But it wasn't a problem until right where I was about to turn left onto my street. There was this man walking by himself, maybe 40s, a little scruffy, but not homeless. The sidewalk was narrow, and I didn't want to freak him out. So when I got about 6 feet behind him, I said, "Hey, behind you!" And he turned around and gave me this super angry look. I turned down me street and he started to follow me, literally screaming about how I was and he was going to kill me and all that. I live right off the corner and I didn't want him to figure that out. So I decided to do another loop around the block. That's not the scary part. The scary part is that when I looped back around and looked down the street, the guy in question was definitely not actually homeless. We have a large population of mentally ill in that area, unfortunately. Downtown of a medium-sized city. So if I didn't think the sidewalk was too narrow to pass otherwise, I wouldn't have disturbed him. Half the scary part was that he looked pretty much completely normal for my area. That being said, I ended up texting my mom, and she made the decision not to notify law enforcement until my bike was stolen. The 4th story. I had awesome parents who let me sleep in the living room on weekend nights when I was very young, because my sister was a light sleeper, and I could stay up until dawn. But of course, I always end up sleeping on the couch because Nick at night made me tried. So one night, I wake up to the prickly feeling, like an instinct. Just bolted into a sitting position and stared out the front window. We lived in rural Georgia, so you can imagine the magnitude of trees. In perfect light cast from the moon, I see a silhouette of someone in this tree. The family dog dashes to the window and is snarling into the glass. Terrified, I run into my parents' room and try to explain to my parents that there is a strange person outside. Dad grabs something defensive and darts outside with the dogs to beat the wax off the hothead. I tremble in Mama's arms until Dad comes home and says he saw no one and to go to bed. I decide to sleep in my regular bedroom. I fill in my sister in as to what happened. Dad is making regular rounds in the house with a cup of coffee. We are all still, and I finally think I can sleep. Nope! I notice the man outside my window. From what I can see in the moonlight, he gives me a shush signal and runs away. Just turns around to run a straight line away. I swear, I couldn't stop crying for what felt like hours. The 5th story. My house sits farther back in the lot than most other houses. It is a strange layout as well. The sidewalk runs the length of the living room and ends at the front porch, which lets into the living room. Large windows that do not open allow great light to get into the living room, but at the cost of no privacy. The rest of my family was on vacation, and having the house to myself, I decided I would get smashed. Well, I pass out on the couch in the living room at about 9 when I realized I was too scared to walk back to my room. The couch is right underneath these big windows. I woke up suddenly, not knowing why. I had a severe case of the chills, and I could not figure out why. Then the banging started. It came from right above me. I did not move, but I opened my eyes and looked up at the window. Someone was standing there, pounding on the glass. Without moving, I looked at the cable box. It was around 3 in the morning. The banging continues. Then it stopped suddenly, but I still did not move. Suddenly, it commences again, coming from 2 different directions now. Someone is banging on the window, and another person is banging on the front door. They kept doing it. The 6th story. I was 17 and had just gotten my license. Back in high school, my friends and I had made it a mission to find abandoned houses to throw parties in. We had a few good candidates, but the motherlode was this house I would pass on my home from work. It was an undeveloped shell of a huge home with a large property in the back. I had told one of my friends about it, and one day, before we went to see a movie, I took him to the house. It was about dusk in summer, so I had my headlights on. I pulled into the front of the house, and we were there for like 10 seconds tops before we pulled back to go to the main road. A minute later, this big truck pulls up behind us with its high beams on and riding our ass. My friend and I took note of it, but paid it no mind as we headed back to the main road. At the light, I turned right, but the truck cut through the gas station at the corner and blocked us off. Out of the truck comes this big hulk of a man, and my friend and I are shitting our pants. He raps on the window, and I roll it down. Now, the really freaky part is that this a busy road, and now there was no one in sight. He asks us what we were doing at the house, and I quickly lied and said we were making a U-turn. He stares at us for a few seconds, smiles, and sends us on our way. To this day, the house remains unfinished, and I'm convinced it's a drug operation of some sort. The 7th story. When I was about 10, all of my cousins and siblings were over. About 10 of us there. The parents and grandparents were out for an adult dinner. So it was just the kids sitting around watching a few movies when all of a sudden the house shook and there was a large flash coming from the backyard. It felt as if a bomb dropped. We all heard, felt, and saw it, and as a pack, we ran into the hallway. The eldest cousins in the group debated on calling the police, but opted to call the parents. After a few minutes, we gained our courage and ventured out into the living room again, this time with weapons, just in case. After a half hour with no other issues, the parents came home and thought we were insane. There was nothing wrong with the backyard, and no neighbors reported anything. It's been 10 years, and we still talk about it, trying to figure out what it was. That has been the scariest thing to happen to me by far. The 8th story. Okay, so this happened to me last summer when I was back at my parents' house during the holidays. It was around 3 a.m., and I was in my room on my computer when I got a call from my sister. Now, that was already a little bit weird since my sister's room is just down the hallway from mine, and she could have just came in my room. I went to pick up, and the call ended as soon as I reached the phone. I figured that she wanted to speak with me, so I got up and went to her room. As soon as I reached her door, she started screaming that someone was in the room with her. So I busted in, and of course, nobody was here. After she stopped crying, she told me that she woke up and saw a dark shadow just centimeters from her face. And that's when she screamed. So I told her that she called me. She tell me that her phone is not in her room and that she was sleeping. Sure enough, her phone is actually downstairs in her purse. The weird part is that I have the log of her call on my phone, but she doesn't. Never managed to explain this one. The 9th story. This is not supernatural creepy, but is one of the more disturbing and surreal experiences of my life. One early morning a few short years ago, I am walking to my bus stop and eating a banana. It is dark, misty, around 5 a.m., and I am internally debating something trivial, like if I want my daily Starbucks before or after the commute. As I approach the dimly lit corner on my street, a tall man in a black mask steps out of the dark alleyway to my left. Sleepy and disoriented, I barely acknowledge him. When he shouts, "Put down your fucking purse," and points his gun to my head, things start to click. The man says, "Put down your bags," and I tell him, Okay, I'm putting them down over here." He orders me to walk over to him, toward the alley, and get down on the fucking ground, and I agree. I'm coming, okay. My heart is beating 1,000,000 miles a minute, and my hands still don't know why, but my mouth won't stop working. Look, see, I'm on the ground. My stuff is over there. Please, just take my stuff. But he doesn't like it. Shut the fuck up, okay? He gets on top of me and puts the gun to my head. At this point, I should mention the fact that I'm on my way to coach a high school practice, and I'm dressed like a dude. Huge baggy pants, hat, jacket. If not for my telltale voice, I'd look like a prepubescent 90s rap star. Anyway, as the guy gets on top of me, gun to my head, he looks at me and pauses. I can't tell you why I know this, but I swear that at this moment, it clicks for him that I'm a woman. He gets off of me, stands up, and points to the dark alley. Come with me. My stomach hurts. I remember that there have been a recent rash of sexual assaults in my neighborhood, during the daytime no less. When the man points down that dirty alleyway, my internal voice speaks the hell up. Says voice number 1, "There was no way in hell you are going to go down there without a fight." "But he has a gun, you dipshit," replies voice number 2. "Fucking follow me." The real voice, his voice, hollers. So I do what I do best. I talk. "I'm coming. I'm following you. I call, and the man makes a crucial mistake. He believes me. I take 1, 2 tiny steps backwards toward the sidewalk, and he turns his body and his gun toward the alley. This is my moment. I take a deep breath, tuck my head down in case he starts shooting, and start sprinting away. I hear a voice screaming in a high-pitched wail before I realize that it's mine. After running 6 or 7 blocks, I head back to my apartment, hoping he's not there. The 10th story. My grandmother swore by this story till her dying day. It was during the war in London, and my dad was a baby. She was bombed out of her house and was staying with a friend. The friend had set her up in her room on the top floor. Anyway, she was taking my dad upstairs to bed when a figure materialized on the stairs, telling her not to sleep in that room tonight. She noped back downstairs and told her friend that she and my dad were sleeping in the sitting room that night. Her friend was annoyed, but agreed. That night, a bomb exploded near the house, and the roof caved in, right on top of my dad's cot. He would have been killed. The 11th story. Back in 2004, I was a young, dumb 17-year-old country girl in the city for the first time for college. One night, I decided I could totally safely walk back to my dorm at around 1:30 in the morning, despite not really knowing where I was. Of course, I instantly end up wandering around a terrible part of the city. Most of the street lights are busted out, trash everywhere, loud arguments from inside the dilapidated as row houses. In short, I wouldn't even want to be here in the middle of the day. A car drives up behind me and slows down, so they're keeping pace with me for nearly an entire block. I look over and there are 5 unsavory-looking men inside. By this point, I was approaching an intersection, and they pull up, make a left, and stop in the street, directly in my path. Mother, I completely panic at this point and just stand there, right in front of them. My mind went completely blank. I've never been that scared in my life. It didn't even make sense to try to run, because they would have caught me without question. I'm not really sure how long I stood there, but suddenly, the porch light in the house just past the car came on. Dude casually strolls outside, carrying a bag of trash, and car peels away. I completely break down crying and shaking. Dude spots me and listens to my probably incoherent story, takes me inside and gives me a soda. Then he and his roommate walk me back to my dorm. They were both lovely and invited me to check out their stand-up sometime. But unfortunately, I was too young to get into a bar. I never saw them again. Don't even remember their names, but feel pretty confident that if that guy hadn't decided to take his trash out at 1 a.m. on a Saturday, my life would have taken a really shitty turn that night. Edit. I completely accept that this was totally my fault and a horribly dumb thing to do. I was extremely fortunate and am no longer that stupid. The 12th story. My mother told me this not too long ago, but it happened about 10 years ago now. When my cousin was 18 years old, she was in a car crash and had died a couple of weeks later in hospital She was really close to my dad's sister, our aunt, and used to babysit her kids, who were no more older than 4 years old, all the time. Our aunt's house was under construction just before she passed away, and it continued on after she passed away. One day, my aunt got a phone call while she was at work from one of the construction workers complaining about a teenage girl who keeps showing up at the house and walking around, and that she shows up a number of times during the weeks, and it has been happening for a couple of weeks. My aunt asks for a description of the girl to see if she knows her from around the neighborhood. And sure enough, the description perfectly matches my cousin, who died a few weeks before. Long brown hair, red baseball cap, denim dungarees, and a white jacket. When my aunt got home, she showed them a picture of my cousin, and that all agreed that it was the girl they seen walking around the site. This story really freaked me out when I heard it, because our family was never one to believe in anything paranormal or have anything of the paranormal sort happen to them before. The 13th story. When I was in high school, I had a really good friend who lived next door to a house that was always up for sale. People would move out in the middle of the night without a word, and it hadn't had the same owner for more than 6 months straight for a couple of years. One night, we were really bored, and he suggested we go explore the house next door, since it had sat empty for a while. We go around back, and there's a dog door that he can crawl through, and he unlocks the door and lets me in. The house itself is really unremarkable. It looked like it was built in maybe the 1950s and was a craftsman-style house in an older, nicer part of town. My friend's house was similarly built. The kitchen had a really nice built-in breakfast table set against a picture window. The house's electricity was off, but you could see the street light through the window. My friend and I sit down on the floor across from this table and are just hanging out, talking. Why? Who knows? All of a sudden, my friend screams, and in that instant, my vision goes black. But it wasn't that I just couldn't see. My body was engulfed in this sickly coldness from head to toe. I start screaming, and I feel my friend's hand grabbing mine and pulling me in some direction forcefully. My vision slowly comes back, and I start to warm up when I realize that we're outside under the street light. It was December and should have been much warmer inside of. Finally, I look at my friend and he looks scared. I'm really confused and kind of panicked myself, and finally ask him what happened. He says that as I was talking, a black thing, this figure that was all black and only had the vague shape of a girl, crawled out from under the table and sat on top of me. Apparently, I started groping around with my eyes wide open, like I couldn't see, and he was so freaked out, he pulled me out of the house. We're still friends, and we bring it up every now and then. But the story itself never changes, and it still sends chills down my spine. To this day, I've never felt such blackness or coldness in my life. It was palpable, almost sticky. For a couple of days afterward, I couldn't shake this unsettling feeling, and I could never walk past that house again. Oh, I'm scared to get out of bed now.
Подпишись на канал, поставь лайк и напиши в комментариях, что думаешь по поводу этих историй.